I'm Jenny Eagle, reporter for Leah, and I'm here with David Borley from Skanska. And we're delighted to say Skanska is celebrating Global Lifting Awareness Day today. David, tell us what your role involves as the lead AP in lifting at Skanska.
My role is predominantly around looking after all areas of lifting. So I look at improving behaviours, standards, and most importantly, listening to people, understanding what their needs are, putting in place where I can practical guidance. We have a series of guidance documents I sort of helped put together, aiding communication and learning, and we have monthly forums within our company to try and help people with lifting, and we do a lot of support on different projects, what their planning needs are, any ongoing support they need. We look at reviews, audits, and one of the key things that a lot of T1s are doing this is they're looking at how we link logistics, loading and lowering, because we know that the key to successful projects is getting them elements right. And if you don't link them properly, you won't have a very good project, and certainly won't have a very safe project. Obviously, one of the key things is improving competency and awareness, innovations, improvements to methods. So one of the things I'm going to touch on later on is how we've looked at trying to keep people off of loads, but I'll save that for a minute. So we're looking a lot around what we do like that. So we also have in place framework agreements with many suppliers and companies that supply equipment and management companies. And basically that looks at all of the things that are needed around that, certifications, obviously association with companies like Leah and CPA, etc., etc. One of the biggest things we've probably picked up over the last year or so is looking at training. So at the moment, a lot of companies do their own training standards. It's not very efficient, and it's also not the best for the whole industry going forward. So one of the things I learned on Crossrail was that there was a lot of good stuff done, but it wasn't handed down to the next project, which was HS2. So this revolved around people putting in good training standards, which then didn't move on. So one of the things that I formed after that was the lead AP group, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. That was formed predominantly because I wasn't happy with what I was seeing on Crossrail, and I wanted to find a way of getting everybody together to actually improve that in the future.
So tell us, what is the Lifting Lead AP Group?
Lead AP Group was something that when I was looking at Crossrail many years ago, I pretty well was in a bit of state of shock. You go from project to project, and even when there were JVs, the same company doing different projects in different locations or even different companies, the mix mash of standards that people followed was frightening, to be quite frank. So I was one day sitting in a little coffee shop in Aldersgate Street back in 2015, and I thought, no, we're better than this. We can do something better than this. So I managed to get some like-minded people together. We started meeting up on a regular basis, and that's formed over the next 9 years the Lead AP Group. So we're now a pretty big group, basically sponsored by GGR, where we hold a lot of our events, and obviously Skanska, who've been great supporting me over the years. CPA, who have now adopted us effectively. So we've come under their sort of help for administration support and a website. And obviously lots of other people have helped us along the way. Big mention to HSE here, because the HSE have helped me out no end helping set this up, because they know that they have limited funds, and anything where we can actually get lots of different groups together to tell people what they're about is very helpful to the HSE. So there's a lot of good work done by a lot of people. The problem is they don't all know what's going on. So we end up with some companies doing the same thing twice, rather than getting all them good minds in one place and coming up with a better conclusion. So that's a lot of what we do, and that's part of our simple aims, really. So better communication and collaboration, looking at all these different governing bodies, what they do, assisting and improving with guidance and regulations. Particularly, we've got a lot of people that sit in the British Standards Committees. Say, for example, like there's been some issues around sector-specific guidance around rail recently. So we've got people that are working with the CPA, looking at their guidance, and looking at ACOP and other guidance around rail, and we're sort of bringing that together to make it better. We've got a couple of guys in particular looking at that. So we've got sharing information on excellence. So we all try and learn from our excellence, don't we? So, if we can find an improvement, whether it's a method or something else, but we'll look at that. And then basically one of the things, going back to the training, which I mentioned before, which was picked up in the early days, was what we're now trying to do is trying to create courses within NOC and the CPCS. So these courses particularly look at specialist areas. So we understand there's base standards for APs, for supervisors, for slinger signals. But what this does, this looks at information with it. So say, for example, you want to know more about tower cranes, or you want to know more about excavator lifting, or lifting accessories, the sort of stuff that Leah do a lot around. So if you want to look at that, we're creating specific courses for them that then can be accredited by NOCN, who obviously own the CPCS brand now, so that we can actually push that out more widely. So it won't matter then if you go on another project in the future, whether it's a HS2 or another project in the future, whether it's any company you want to consider, we can all use the same training that these people have undergone, rather than it's been, oh, that's a Skanska training or that's a MACE training. We can all use it because basically it's industry accredited. That's where the AP group is, and within that there's lots of companies. I mentioned a couple there, but you've got Vulcan, Wolfram, McGee's, Worldex, Robert McAlpine's, Costain's, Kiers. I could go on, Balfour Beatty's, GGR Group that I've mentioned, and there's so many that have been involved in this. So because it's grown so much, I've had to put a bit of structure behind it. So it's no longer the Dave Borley Roadshow. So I've now created some chairs. I've got 4 senior chairs, and then they've each got a deputy chair. So the 4 senior chairs are Tom Pawson, great guy, Costain's lead of lifting, looking after all kinds of stuff, very good technical guy. I've got Darren Biggs, who's with Carey's now, looking after the lifting there. Also input into it, Steve Blake from Keltbray, looking at all stuff there. I've got Teddy Holt from Radius Cranes, Keith Sylvester, looking at from Almy, helping us with a lot of stuff to do with the technical stuff because he's very good technically. We've got lots of other people involved in it, and obviously we've got Casey Keller from CPA helps administer us, and we've got Peter Brand who will help me set this up with the likes of Brent Bolt from the HSE, so big kudos to them. So they're the people behind it, besides myself, really.
How does your company lead best practice in terms of cranes, hoists and height safety?
What we do around this is we look at our framework partners. So we like to have a lot of framework agreements. So probably Skanska are known around the industry as having probably more than most of these. So we put great emphasis on understanding our people, to making sure that they are the right people. So they undergo rigorous checks basically, and pre-agreement audits that we put in place that I take part of, and various other people in the company take part of. That's something that clearly we do in quite a lot of depth. We benchmark them against different companies. So if it's a tower crane company, we might look at a dozen tower crane companies and take benchmark them again to see which ones are regarded as doing, good stuff around innovation, health and safety. Make sure their quality's up to the standard we want. We check their accreditations with people like Leah, memberships of industry groups, compliance to the various British standards, what best practice they follow. And a real one that we'd like to look at is how they train and support their staff, because you're only as good as your people. So that, to me, that's a real big one. We'd like to try and make sure that they can all offer the technical expertise we need, and that's quite a hard thing to do. So you end up having to look into quite a lot of depth of the people they've got. And then one of the things that often gets picked up on, especially when you look at equipment, is maintenance. So maintenance standards vary massively in this industry. So a lot of companies will say, oh, we only want cranes under 10 years, for example. And we know that a lot of cranes are over 10 years, right? So then you've got to start looking at the maintenance regimes for them cranes, how the cranes are going to be used, who's carrying out the maintenance, all that kind of good stuff. And then that gets into maybe you need to have accreditations more regularly and stuff like that. So we look at all kinds of stuff around that. And also, have you met the various obligations you've got around employee regulations? So whether it be IR35, PAYE, so make sure that the people are coming in with the right checks in place. Ensure all of our partners now are actually involved in what I mentioned around the lead AP. We're all trying to work together. And the latest big push is this hands off the load, HOSAS, which I'm going to explain in a minute, because that is a fundamental change, whereas up to now, most people have tried to put the hand on the load to control it in a way, and we are taking people away from this.
Can you tell us specifically about the Below the Hook safety programme you're a part of?
One of the big drives this year has been looking at this area in particular, because we've had, it's fair to say, a few incidents over the last few years. And what was the catalyst to drive it over the limit was Costain's had a fatal accident on one of their projects in Gatwick, where a slinger signal was unfortunately crushed by a load and died of his injuries. And from that investigation and several other things that have occurred, as I said, and it was clear that we were putting personnel too close to loads. So if you're in close proximity to something that's dangerous, it's only a matter of time, before somebody gets hurt. We've had this with people planted interface, and there's probably been a lot of work done around that in recent years. So we thought, actually, I started looking at that as well, and actually how we changed that, and that sort of influenced some of this as well. So this was predominantly led by Costain's, So they did an incident called Hands Off Step Back, which was led by their lead AP, Tom Pawson, who's one of my chairs. So Tom's doing an awful lot of work around this, so it's worth mentioning that. So Skanska obviously wanted to support this because we work a lot of JVs together. So we come up with this Hand Off the Load campaign. We've been pushing that. So Cothe and the Skanska were pushing this quite hard, and a lot of other companies have joined similarly, and we're pushing this in a way. It's actually had a lot of traction within the industry. So we've come up with this thing called HOSAS, which is an acronym for Hands Off, Step Away, Safe Space. And that's because safe positioning during lifting operations and minimising direct contact when you can, we know it's not always possible, where you can, would help reduce that risk to the people involved from any sort of load movement. So we know loads can move in wind. They can move, for a whole host of reasons. Maybe the centre of gravity of the lift isn't right. We get a bit of vortex in wind around a building, and suddenly we get a gust of wind and moves the load. So where we can look at doing that, that's what we do. This initiative has brought back a change of people's behaviours. So if you can imagine a load as it was maybe some people struggling to hold a load in, maybe a year ago, other slingers close by would have run to that load to try and help control it, right? All you're doing with that is you're putting more people at risk. If a load is being pushed by the wind, if you had half a rugby team hanging on one end of it, you're not going to stop it. If it wants to go left, it's going to go left. It's trying to change people's behaviours about actually going to help you. It's a bit like a first aid situation where you go in the room, the guy's fallen on the floor, he's been electrocuted. Don't go rushing in, turn the electric off first. It's a bit like that. Step back and think about what you're doing before you go in. So I'm using that analogy, but that's pretty well where it's going. So we're looking at what we can do practically to limit that. So maybe we change the methods. If a method had 4 people around the load, we try and change the method so there's 2 people around the road, changing that pyramid of risks. So less people involved, less chance of somebody getting hurt. So we're looking at methods, and training is a big one. CITB has set the training standards for a lot of the courses we do for AP, slingers and signers have bought into this now, so they're happy to come on board. So they're going to use it in their training and their standards. EPCS and NOCN are going to make sure that these are adopted into courses, so that in future, whether you do an AP course, you'll know about HOSAS, you know why we're doing it. So when you go and you're new to the industry, and then you go to another company, it won't be new to you. You'll accept that actually I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I should be stepping back from the load. So it's to try and change that mindset and the behaviour.
And do you conduct other safety stand downs and toolbox talks around lifting?
For safety stand downs, Skanska in particular likes to do global safety stand down. So if we've had sadly a fatality anywhere in the world, we'll all stand down for that. Somebody will go through a briefing so we understand what's happened, look at what we try to put in place to prevent it happening in the future. And the whole idea about this is to learn. We want people to go to work and go home safely. Nobody wants anybody to get hurt. So we try and do what we can around that to try and reduce that. So toolbox talks you mentioned, we've got our own system of how-to guides, which I've helped great with a load of other people centrally within Skanska, and that's helping looking at specific targets. So if you're looking at a tower crane expert, telehandler, maybe a lifting accessories that give you some guidance around that, and it might divert you into more technical information, say for like somebody like Lear or the CPO web. So we've got them documents in place, we share them. We do equipment specific talks for the project. So if you're in a sector where you're in tower cranes or you're into the inshore, offshore, whatever it is, we look at all of that. Excavators particularly has become a bit of a lifting thing because we know they're primarily not designed for lifting, so they create their own problems. So we've had to look at that. We do a lot of support with the EP group, so we understand what they're doing. We try and support that. Skanska, as I mentioned before, give me a lot of time to dedicate to that, which is, without their help, I certainly couldn't have started this group up, to be honest with you. We undertake many working groups, so there's lots of many working groups. I mentioned that before. So understanding where these working groups are is one of the key things of the lead EP group. So if you find, say for example, like Langer Rorke's are doing something, Mate's doing something, Taylor Woodrow doing something, it's all the same. Rather than let's get them all in the same room together. Let's get a better outcome. So I'm very much in that sort of communication. Let's get it improved. Where we can work together, let's work together. And on all of that good stuff. So Skanska recently have done a thing called Own It. It's a little campaign. In fact, it ran all last week. And I did some travelling around the country in my car to go to various things and do some talking. So we have 4 key targeted areas. And this year it was lifting, loading and lowering, electricity, people, plant interface and working at height. So we covered a lot of stuff around that. And obviously the big push we put in there was around hose out. So only accept stable loads, stay back from suspended loads and hands off suspended loads. So we pushed a lot of stuff around this, all related to hose out.
Does Skanska own and maintain its own fleet of cranes and lifting gear?
Yes, Skanska does own a lot of its own equipment, not traditionally cranes as such, but a lot of equipment within our piling division, for example. We have lots of piling rigs and they have lots of different accessories and equipment that supports that. We tend to hire in the bulk of our cranes, whether they be tower cranes or mobile cranes or what they are. And, if it's excavators and stuff, we've got these framework agreements I mentioned where we go to approved suppliers and they come in. So everything is done by the frameworks, I think that's fair to say. And our biggest areas of equipment are probably tower cranes, crawler cranes, mobile cranes, excavators, probably what most other big companies use as well. But yeah, our piling industry in particular have a lot of dedicated owned equipment. So that's probably the only operating unit within Skanska UK anyway. Certainly it varies outside of Skanska UK in different countries that have different models to work to. But in the UK, it's fair to say that the bulk of our cranes are hired in.
How will you be supporting GLAD today and encouraging other tier one companies to do the same?
So what we've done for GLAD is we had our meeting recently, the EFP group meeting, and it was brought up now. I brought it up myself, so to let people make sure that people are aware of it. Skanska have just done this, like I said, the Own It campaign, which was last week, which is all part of this. So we are going to obviously gladly supporting GLAD effectively. So we're doing that, and a lot of other C1s are aware of it, and they're all doing their own various collar takes on it. So many are undertaking their own campaigns, it's fair to say, and obviously GLAD will form part of that. I'm definitely getting that pushed out for the next couple of weeks and some slides going out promoting GLAD. So, and obviously we want to support this because obviously too many people are hurt through incidents at work, and particularly in operations. We want to make sure that we can do things as safely as we can. That was the whole idea of bringing the lead AP group together. And all I can do is say that we will continue to do that. And anybody that's listening to this, even if you don't like me drawing in on, if you're listening to it and you're willing to join the lead AP group, please do, because you're only as good as the people in it. And the more people that are in it, the better we can change the industry. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.